Hello readers, I'm Amy and I'm your nonfiction feminist. Today I want to talk about what gets me to pick up certain books on my shelves by going through my shelves. I just decided to title this video as buzzwords because that's what I think of when I think of buzzwords. I think the word that captures my interest. I guess really it's something that's fashionable at the time. I don't know. But I already had the idea. So, buzzwords. What captures my interest? What words really grip me and make me want to pick up a book? We're going to start with my little TBR shelf. Now, I have several TBR shelves, of course, but this is my, December TBR shelf. Okay. Got my TBR shelf, right next to the camera. You're sitting on my desk right now. Let's start off with The Water Cure. I have seen this going around a couple of channels, and I saw it at a bookstore recently and picked it up, and the very first thing I read on the inside cover, a fiercely poetic feminist revenge fantasy about three sisters raised on an isolated island to fear men. And then my husband got it for me for my birthday. Fiercely poetic feminist revenge fantasy. Revenge is always interesting. Fiercely poetic makes me think of, writing that really grips you in a certain way, and I'm a huge... I love a really good writing style. If it doesn't have a good writing style, I'm probably not going to read the book. I'm a stickler about that. Feminist, well, that one's just kind of obvious. Three sisters, you've got a story about women, these people are related somehow, that's going to be interesting. Raised on an isolated island to fear men. That brings up the subject of cults, which I am also really interested in. I've watched quite a few documentaries on Netflix about cults, but I haven't really read about them yet, so this will be kind of my first cult book. Also, because regular noises around the house just kind of don't exist for me sometimes. I'm sorry if you hear the washing machine or the dryer in the background. It's kind of white noise to me. Little Women! I actually was raised on this book, and not only do we have the wonderful Emma Watson movie coming up, but again, this is a classic story written by a woman about a bunch of sisters raised in a house together. Yeah, that interests me. Wives and Daughters. This one is large and pink and titled Wives and Daughters. So, could say this is a color buy or a title buy, and this is just a really nice shade of pink. I've also heard some amazing things about Elizabeth Gaskell, so I can't wait to get started on her writing. Orlando! This one I think was actually in my haul revisit, so it's one that I really need to read. And I actually had a teacher let me borrow his copy of the movie for this, and it's this person who just wakes up one day and they've switched genders and continue to go about their life. So, that sounds interesting. Love gender and gender swapping stories, and that just sounds awesome. Lolita, classic about a pedophile. That's going to be interesting and capture my interest. I'm getting to this soon. I've actually just emailed someone about our buddy read. We're trying to decide. It's a subscriber and I were possibly reading Lolita together. We're supposed to read Little Women together, and I realize I'm only halfway through November, but I am so over my November TBR. It's just not working out. I might not even bother with my last nonfiction book that I was going to read this month because the other one's just, I'm slogging. This one is Reading Lolita in Tehran. So not only, it's a memoir. I love memoirs. Memoirs are my top nonfiction. I don't know if it's translated. I'm going to assume it's translated until I look it up later and learn otherwise. But it's about reading Lolita, which is a famously banned book. It's a book about a guy who's chasing after this underage girl, and you're reading it in another country. You've got the women with the words are escaping me, not burqas. Burqas are more full coverage. Anyway, they have the headscarves. So that's definitely not representational of a country that I would think would at all allow Lolita to be read. So that just sparks my interest that much more. We've got Shirley. I just did a rearrangement, so I forgot to put this back on my TBR afterwards. Shirley is just part of my little Bronte project I'm going through, starting with Anne Bronte, then to Charlotte Bronte, then to Emily Bronte. Again, this is a famous set of sisters who all happened to write very well-known, well-written books, and I hadn't read them before, and I really loved Anne Bronte, and now I'm working my way through Charlotte Bronte. I'm going to start with Shirley and then move on to Villette. So we'll see how that goes. But that one is just like the authors themselves are very interesting to me. And now we will do a quick little walkthrough on the rest of my shelves, see what I've read so far, why I loved it, and hopefully not totally bust up my camera. Okay, I'm sideways, but that works. You are next to my sex and feminism shelf. Selfish, shallow, and self-absorbed. This was a good one. 16 writers on the decision not to have kids. As a married woman in her mid-20s, God, I wish people would stop asking me about kids. It's not going to happen. There's nothing you can say to change my mind. This is a book that I found thanks to a book olive. I was watching her review like back maybe last December or something. I got this book in January and I read it immediately and I loved it. It's a topic that's really not discussed as much as it should be, which is the fact that having kids is a decision that you can make. It's not like a requirement. And it helps that it was an excellently written book. Bodies in Doubt, that was another good one. This is a nonfiction about the history of intersex. I actually found a chapter from this book whenever I was looking for research for one of my psychology papers in college, and I ended up buying the book because it was a really great chapter, and stories on intersex and information about intersex people I find so interesting. Again, this isn't something we talk about very often. I've met people who truly believe that intersex is not an actual thing, which it is, because biology, like, it happens. And this was a really informative book, and I loved it. Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. Feminism, for one thing. Also, bad feminist. Like, what makes a bad feminist? Are we all bad feminists? I think we probably are all bad feminists, because, like, there's this idea of what makes a perfect feminist. Let's say the perfect ideal feminist is always going out and advocating. Some of us just don't have the mental or physical energy to go out and advocate all the time. I used to be a volunteer for Planned Parenthood, and that's still on my Facebook profile, but I haven't volunteered for them in like a year because now I work overtimes. The volunteer times just don't work with my schedule. My job is very mentally exhausting. I just don't have it in me anymore to go out there and go to the meetings and go to the marches. So does that make me a bad feminist? Maybe in some ways. Maybe some days I'm just too lazy to go out there and march. But it's just, I love the exploration of bad feminism and the discussion that she has around it, and it was really good. Please read it. Ooh, Radium Girls. Radium Girls was an awesome one also. There's Lil Amadeus. Radium Girls. This is the dark story of America's shining women. So again, this is a history about women, and whenever I read it, I got really, really angry because, like, I read this book and I'm thinking, why the hell did I not learn this stuff in high school or in college? This is the kind of history that is left out of the history books. These are women who were making radium watches. After the war? During the war? During the First War. The First World War. They were making radium watches. Radium is very poisonous. There wasn't a ton of research on it at the time, but these girls became living proof that it was poisonous and no one did anything about it. And it's just one of those books that really makes you angry and want to go out there and just, oh, so good. I realize I'm going through a lot of nonfiction right now. It just happens to be the shelf that I am currently standing next to. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I'd heard of Caitlin Doughty from a friend at a book club, and then I think I heard about this specific book from a Book Olive. Again, she's like my main nonfiction resource. So, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory. So it's a memoir. Again, that's like a huge thing for me. It's got a really interesting title, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Like, that's someone really putting a lot of thought into what they title their book. And it's lessons from a crematory. Like, death is really interesting. And wow, this book was written by someone who works in the death industry. Awesome. And then the first couple paragraphs, I remember, automatically got me. Okay. A girl always remembers the first corpse she shaves. It is the only event in her life more awkward than her first kiss or the loss of her virginity. The hands of time will never move quite so slowly as when you are standing over the dead body of an elderly man with a pink razor in your hand. Like, this woman is hilarious, and it shows. Alright, we will move on to some fiction. Jurassic Park. This is my nice collector's leather-bound Barnes & Noble edition, which you should never read because the red ink gets on the white and it's just a whole mess. You can't really see it in the video, but there's just pink, like, coming all around these edges, and it upsets me. So I will never read this particular version of the book again, but it still looks really pretty on my shelves. Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs, amusement park, people trapped on an island, like, what else do I have to say? It's also very sciencey. I think that's what trips people up with this book a lot, is how science heavy it is. But I found, oddly enough, that I really, really like that, even though I hated science classes growing up. There's something about a good science-based novel that really gets me. Dracula. Non-sparkly vampires. That's... what is going on with my lighting? Better. Okay. Dracula. Non-sparkly vampires. I will link my recent review up above, which you should totally watch because I put a lot of effort into talking with fangs. There's also a lot of kind of metaphors about Victorian sexuality, which is super interesting. Do a couple more. The Book of the Unnamed Midwife. Again, you've all heard me talk about this. I will link the review in the cards this way, I think. First off, the cover. The cover immediately caught my eye. I really love a good galaxy photo on covers. It's got like some pinks and some yellows and some blues in there. The Book of the Unnamed Midwife. So it's about a midwife. It's about like birthing and babies and stuff, and this person is unnamed. That's going to be interesting. The dystopia was not something that I really read too much of, and then I read the back of this, and that's really when dystopia started to pick up for me. Like, that's around the time that I read The Power, I got Vox, Red Clocks. Like, I really started to get into the dystopias. The Handmaid's Tale I read several years ago, but it didn't really give me the drive to read dystopias that this book did. Yeah, a bunch of the women of the US, at least, possibly the world, get really sick during pregnancy, and they die, and their babies die, and we're trying to survive in this world where women are limited. So that causes some really, really big problems. Again, for details, check out my review, because there's way too much to talk about with this one. Mists of Avalon. One of the few fantasies that I have read and truly loved. This is a King Arthur retelling. It's from the perspectives of all of the important women in the original story. It's kind of a feminist retelling. You're getting a different perspective on everything. So again, what more do I need to say? You kind of got the idea here of books that I like. Sex, death, gender, feminism, women writers, which I see a lot of people having goals, or I talk to a lot of people every year who have the goal that this year they're really going to focus on women writers. And I'm like, you have to try to do that? Like, without trying, most of my reading, like I would say 90% of the books that I read in a year are women writers, and I'm not trying to read more women writers, I just happen to read more women writers. I don't know. So that's kind of what I have for you. Those are the books that end up really sparking my interest. So hey, in the comments down below, let me know some of your buzzwords, or like maybe recommend some books that you think I'd really enjoy reading that I will maybe eventually get to sometime before I die. Great talking to you all. Please like, subscribe, follow me on social media. I post every Wednesday, Sunday, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, friends. Amadeus also wants to say goodbye. Ugh. Say goodbye, kitty. Say goodbye. Yeah. He's cute, isn't he? Alright, go away.